Run for your life. Welcome back. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Hess, and this is episode 3 of Health and Healing, brought to you by the Scott Valley Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I've entitled this third episode, Run for Your Life, because we're going to be focusing on physical exercise and the benefits and the risk. I don't know if there's any risk, but maybe there is. We'll talk about the benefits of exercise and help to define what it is, how much you should do, and how to get started. So as I mentioned in episode 1, when we reviewed the New Start acronym, which maybe by now you've gotten that down, New Start, NEW, nutrition, exercise, water. So today, last episode, we talked about nutrition, and in this third episode, we're talking about exercise. As I mentioned in that first episode, there's been a couple of studies looking at physical exercise and your reduction in risk from the current pandemic. So I'm going to put a couple of links down in the description below for 2 studies on this. One of them was done in South Korea. Apparently in South Korea, they do an annual health assessment of men, at least within the health system that did this study. They identified more than 200,000 men who had had an assessment of their physical activity level completed in 2018 and 2019. And then they compared that to the database of people affected by the pandemic and found over 70,000 in that database. And then they had divided them into groups based on the amount of exercise that they typically did. And they had 3 groups. They had the one group that consistently did the recommended amount of exercise. They had a group that consistently did not exercise. And then they had the middle group of people who exercised sometimes but didn't actually meet the recommendations. And I won't go into all the details, but I will tell you that it was quite remarkable that they found those who had a history of doing the recommended amount of exercise compared to those who did not were 83% less likely to die from this virus. 83% less likely to die. That's very significant. They also found that even those in the middle group who did not meet the exercise recommendations, but who did exercise somewhat regularly, or at least occasionally, they found that that group also had a reduction in their risk. So that was from South Korea. The second study that I'm going to link is actually from Southern California. And here, it was sort of a similar thing. They identified the people. This was in Kaiser Permanente. So within the Kaiser health system, they identified people who had been screened for the amount of exercise that they did, and also who had been diagnosed with the virus. And once again, they stratified them into those who met the recommended amount of exercise. And in this particular study, they looked at 150 minutes a week as the recommended amount of exercise. So we'll come back to that number. And they compared it to those, again, who were not exercising regularly and those who exercised occasionally. And what they found was that those who were not regular exercisers were nearly 2.5 times more likely to die from the virus than people who exercised regularly. 249% more likely. So, or 249% of the risk. So that's also very significant. And these were 2 very large studies that both showed a huge effect of regular physical exercise in reducing their risk. And there's been a bit of discussion about why is that, and we don't have any solid conclusions, but some of the main ideas are that regular exercise increases your circulation, it stimulates your immune system, and reduces inflammation throughout the body. And these are some of the main things that are associated with worse outcomes with this virus. So I'll put those links in the description down below. I want to just go on, though, to say that there are so many proven benefits from physical exercise that even just to list them all would not be possible in this short episode. But some of the highlights really: a reduction in all-cause mortality, which is really dramatic. And I'm going to include in the description below a link to the recommendation by the Department of Health and Human Services about exercise and how they came to the recommendation that is currently available. And there's some graphs in there that are really quite interesting if you want to know more. But reduction in all-cause mortality is dramatic. Reduction in cancer, heart disease, stroke, lung disease, liver disease, infectious disease, we've just been talking about that, osteoporosis, and the list goes on and on. We can look at it from the other way as what are the positive benefits. And of course, you probably already know when you exercise, you feel better physically, mentally, and in pretty much every way. You feel better, you look better, you'll maintain cognitive function at a higher level, and also physical function. So the ability to, for example, I don't have a study to link on this right now, but I saw this a number of years ago. One of the main risk factors for being admitted into a nursing home was if the individual was not able to do a squat. In other words, squat down and stand up without assistance. And that makes sense when you think about it. If you're not able to get down and up on your own, you probably need some assistance with your daily living. So those are some of the positive benefits. In future episode, I'll talk more about specific types of exercise and how you can combine different types of exercise to get the greatest benefit. But I do want to talk about one more significant and proven benefit of physical exercise. And that relates to what's going on in the world right now. Over the last year or so, we've seen significant increases in the amounts of anxiety and depression around the world. And that's due to a lot of different things, but I think a big part of it is fear and also isolation. And those two things combined tend to cause a lot of distress for people. And actually, there's a lot of research on the connection between physical exercise and mental health. And in fact, there's even one study that is showing that physical exercise is comparable to treatment, the traditional treatment in an inpatient psychiatric facility. So people that get admitted to inpatient facilities usually have pretty severe mental illness, and they found that physical exercise is in many cases as effective as medication and psychotherapy. Now, most of you listening to this probably are not admitted into a facility, but many of you may have some anxiety, some depression, maybe some panic attacks occasionally. And the studies, I'm going to link a couple of studies. There's actually been a number of them looking at the risk of anxiety and the effect of physical exercise. And this has been both what we call epidemiologic studies, that is, looking at a group of people and following them over time to see what happens, and also controlled trials where we take specific individuals, do a treatment, and see how that treatment affects them. And the reduction in anxiety symptoms with regular physical activity, and all these studies that I've seen, varies between 30 to 60%, which is really good. And some of the meta-analysis, and what I mean by that is the meta-analysis is or a scientist or a statistician will gather together studies that have been done looking at a particular thing and do the math to figure out how to combine the numbers to get an even more solid idea of the actual effect. And the meta-analysis has been very clear. Physical exercise dramatically reduces symptoms of anxiety on par with medication or psychotherapy. So that's not to say if you're taking medication or if you're in therapy, I'm not saying you should stop that and start exercising, but I am suggesting that you should exercise, and it will help you to be better and reduce the necessity that you have for medication or therapy. Talk to your doctor about that before you're going to change anything. All right. So what kind of exercise and how much exercise should you do? Well, I recommend a combination of both anaerobic and aerobic exercise, or strength training and aerobic exercise. Most of you probably know what that means. And how much? Well, that goes back to that number that I mentioned earlier, the 150 minutes that they used in the study. It turns out that there's a lot of data looking at this amount of exercise and the risk for so many different things that all-cause mortality that I talked about. All-cause mortality just means dying from anything. So exercising regularly reduces your risk for dying from anything in the short term. So 150 minutes a week of vigorous exercise or 300 minutes a week of moderate intensity exercise. So how do we define exercise and vigorous and moderate intensity? Well, exercise is anything that you're doing, moving your body, that increases your consumption of oxygen and your burning of calories in your body. It's a simple description or definition of it. Moderate exercise, you can think of, there's technical ways of describing that, but just think about going for a brisk walk. If you're going for a walk, you're swinging your arms, you're breathing heavier than usual, you can talk, but it's kind of difficult to carry on a good conversation with someone because you're a little bit short of breath. That's moderate exercise. Vigorous exercise would be running. If you're running, you're sweating, you're breathing really hard, there's really not any way you could carry on a easy conversation with someone because you would be breathing too hard and not have the ability to talk because you need to breathe and get more oxygen to support that exercise. So that's vigorous exercise. So 150 minutes of vigorous exercise a week, up to 300 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, or some combination that would equal about that amount of exercise. So if you think of 150 minutes a week, that comes out to 30 minutes 5 times a week, and you get a couple of days off. So, well, what if you don't have time for that? Or what if you don't do any exercise right now? Well, I would recommend to start with just 5 or 10 minutes a day, be consistent every day. And what we find is that 10 minutes a day, every day, actually does you a lot more good than an hour once a week. So, number one, start doing something. And the studies actually show this. The first few minutes of exercise give you the biggest benefit. So there's a curve that the benefit, the reduction in risk of death is greatest in the first few minutes, and then that begins to sort of flatten out. And when you get up above that 150 minutes a week of vigorous exercise, there's still a little benefit, but it's not all that much. That's why we choose that 150 to 300 minutes of exercise. So start doing something that you can be consistent with on a daily basis or most days of the week. Again, even just 10 minutes, 5 or 6 days a week is really good. So start with that. And then I also recommend doing both aerobic and anaerobic exercise. Again, the aerobic is the cardiovascular, you're breathing heavy, maybe sweating, your heart's going a little faster than it normally does. That's things like walking, jogging, swimming, riding a bicycle, cross-country skiing, those sort of things. And strength building exercise, so that's lifting heavy things, or doing body weight exercises, which may be lifting heavy things as well. So some kind of circuit with strength training at least several days a week and aerobic exercise most days of the week. And even if, like I said, if you're doing just 10 minutes a day, you're doing it consistently, that's a great start. You're going to be reaping some of the benefit. And if you really want to maximize that benefit, stay consistent. Just add a couple of minutes per day every week. So maybe this week start with 10 minutes a day. And then next week you can do 12 minutes a day for the next week. And then the week after that, maybe 15 minutes a day. And gradually build yourself up. So that's what I have for you today. Next episode is going to be looking at water, and there's some very interesting things I'm going to share with you. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm actually looking at changing up some of the things that I'm going to be doing because of looking at this research. So I'm sure you'll not want to miss that episode. So in order to be sure you don't miss it, click the subscribe button here and click on the little bell for notifications so you'll be notified when we post another episode. Like, share, and subscribe, all that stuff. Pass it along to your friends. And until next time, be safe, be well, and God bless you, my friends.